so I'm going to introduce the next set of speakers. Before I do, I wanted to just talk a little bit about myself, which I really don't like doing, but we will try that. So my name's Christian. I live in Shanghai. I teach at NYU Shanghai in the Interactive Media Arts program, in the program on creativity and innovation. In general, what I teach, I suppose, is a mixture of things that I find really interesting, and I think I can actually do a very decent job of actually giving people some new information. For this panel, for these talks, I mean, I'm a musician. I've always been a musician. I've always loved to play music, and I've always loved technology, so I've always tried to find ways of putting the two of those together. Right now, I really like VR, so I'm developing a few things, and I just thought I would talk about those. So, some of my work, so mostly these days has been in virtual reality and in the new medium, but not in the way that you guys may know of it. For example, with gaming or 3D graphics, it's been in the area of sound and 3D audio. And the reason that's interesting to me is because I felt like, well, you have this headset on your face, now we can track where your ears are. That just makes it a little more easier for us to be able to do experimentation in sound. So that's what I've been doing the last year and a half. So this is a picture of NYU's campus in Abu Dhabi. And this room, it's called the Innovation Studio, and I was fortunate enough during a trip over the summer to be allowed swipe access to it. So you swipe your card, and lo and behold, what I found was, it's very difficult to see on this screen, but there's about 26 Myers sound speakers in an array. So the room is circular, and all these wonderful speakers, and then in the middle of that, lots of wires, software, fancy computers. It's like a music studio, but it's a music studio kind of built for 3D audio, built for full immersive experiences. So like, what's a guy who's interested in virtual reality? Why do I care about that, right? You'd think I would just want to have a headset on and I have some earphones and be good. Well, the reason I was interested in that was because I thought, well, you know, because I can track your ears, maybe it's possible to have multiple people in a space like this, or others, and actually like have that sound emanating. So I had all this awesome gear, but I had no instruments, so I'm also a musician, and I kind of wanted to play. But what I did have, for those of you who know the HTC Vive or some of these very fancy VR systems, they are super cool. And these controllers, the way they work, without getting into too much of the math, is they provide really, really accurate data on the position of your hands and the position of your face, really the position of anything that happens to have these light sensing diodes on them. So you can move around a room and I know exactly where those controllers are, or where your head is, where your hands are. So I spent, with my good friend and IMA fellow Kyle, the two of us spent a few days kind of locked in this room building a project. And we called the project Bongos, just because, well, that's the sounds that we originally had. So what this project is, or was at that point in time, was it enabled you to go into a virtual reality environment and you'd see instruments, like though they were bongos, and you could play them, but they weren't actually in that room. And when you played them, depending on where you were in the room, that's where the sound came from. So it actually, we tried to emulate the sound of an actual bongo using the speakers that were in that room. We didn't do such a great job, but we had a lot of fun. I'll play for you a little bit of the first clip here. Let's see if this actually works. Oh no, it doesn't seem to be functioning. That's fine, it gets better. So, what's cool about this, or what was kind of difficult about this, was to make this sound happen, had to use a lot of math. I had to use actually quite a lot of math to be able to figure out, you know, how do you account for the rotation of somebody's head, where they happen to be located in a physical space, where the sound source happens to be in a virtual space, et cetera, et cetera. So this is not my forte at all. So I ended up kind of hacking something together, and what I ended up hacking together, if this actually functions, it's kind of cool. I'll let you imagine what it was like. So what it was actually like was you could put this headset on in virtual reality, and you would see these boxes, these different representations of instruments, and you could walk around in a space and play them, and it would sound like that sound was actually coming from that location. So, I mean, we were able to see it even in this room. The spatialization of the sound is really cool. So if we were able to play this video, you would see me playing these instruments, and we would actually hear So kind of where I want to take this project is it started out as just me trying to play around, right, as I said before. But then what we found when we were working on this was there was some interest. Turned out there was a little bit of commercial interest. There's a company called Ableton, another one called Native Instruments. They're both based out of Berlin. Ableton happens to make the software that's used by probably 90% of all electronic musicians, DJs all over the world. And Native Instruments makes a set of plugins, a number of plugins. They're called plugins, but they're like virtual instruments. They make things like pianos that aren't actually pianos. They're all virtualized and they sound amazing. This is the kind of foundational stuff of almost any piece of popular music that you're listening to. That's the software. So when I was in Berlin, I was fortunate enough to be invited to this conference and to start presenting this stuff, not really thinking there's any super big interest commercially for what this could do, and got some hits. So they invited me over to their offices and we talked a little bit about it, and we came up with a few ideas, like some product ideas for this particular technology. And the technology itself is a mashup, right? One piece is the algorithms that do the spatialization of the sound, and the other piece is the idea of a virtual reality music synthesizer or sequencer. And I've got a couple of like kind of where I see the evolution of this going. Headphones that are aware of their surroundings. So we actually have a set of like prototypical kind of headphone tech that lets you walk around and hear those sounds. So you don't have to have a VR headset on. You carry the controller really, and that provides positioning data. And we started talking with the Berlin Philharmonic, for example. They were relatively interested in it, and what we could do with that is you can imagine being able to sit in a room, and we all know about surround sound. Like you sit there and it sounds really great, but what about being able to have surround sound that responds to where you're walking? So if you're listening to a band, and the drummer's over there, and you walk next to the drummer and you're gonna hear more drums. Or you're gonna hear, it's gonna sound like you're actually like within that environment with those musicians. And from that, then I started talking to other people, and they said, you know, Christian, this could actually be really useful for blind people, to help them navigate spaces. So we thought, well, that's actually another kind of a cool thing. So there was another speaker earlier, I'm sorry I didn't catch their name, but they were kind of mentioning like what you can do when you find you go into these universities and you find people that are working in these fields. I'm not actually very interested in commercializing any of these things. I would rather see students do it. Or I would rather say, here's some of this, think about it, what can we do? So anyway, so this is just a really kind of little brief introduction, minus the technical hiccups, but I'd like to now turn it over to Hans, if I may.